Good evening and welcome to the channel. I am Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me today. Glad to have you here. We have got a lot of stuff going on today, so let's go ahead and dive right into things. I do see that Jerry, Lucille, and Luciano are already here and chiming in. Glad to see all three of you and always happy to have you on board. So let's go ahead and get started. I don't have like a focus story today, but to start off with, we're going to talk about the blackouts in Ukraine. Ukraine's overall power infrastructure has now gotten pretty heavily damaged at this point in time. So we've already talked a couple of times about necessary blackouts, and it sounds like this is getting worse. Russia's systematic destruction of Ukraine's energy systems means that by winter, Ukrainians may be without electricity for the vast majority of the day, according to the Financial Times. This is, of course, from an anonymous report or anonymous sources out of the from Ukrainian officials, according to the Financial Times. The reports are that these types of issues are carrying on. You can see many of the homes and things are blacked out, though some still have some power. And then he does a nice sweep of the actual city itself, and you can see, well, it's maybe not quite so bad. There's obviously there are reduced power levels here, and there are issues, but the primary facilities seem to be getting at least some power in the situation right now. According to Frank O, the situation with electricity is getting worse with the days and the warmest ones, but it will definitely be deplorable in winter when cold will make its impact. And then, of course, they ask about air defense systems. And this is the situation. Right now, they're going into summer months. The weather in Ukraine, in fact, as I used to have somewhere in my stuff, the current weather in Ukraine. Let me see if I can find it real fast. There we go. See, this is as of just right in the last little bit here. Let's see if we can get some temperatures here. 85-degree high Fahrenheit. That's Fahrenheit for everybody. So right now the temperatures aren't too bad for the hottest temperatures. With some of the cold temperatures still in the 50s. So overall, we're looking at temperatures that are starting to rise. Zaporizhzhia is already hitting the 90s. And of course, we're not talking a dry heat here, just in case you were wondering. Hi, Al. Glad to have you here. Always glad to see you on board the stream here. So we've got temperatures hitting in the mid 90s to the mid 80s in Ukraine, which means it's going to be hot and toasty and going to be hard to keep up with the air conditioners, especially with the power issues that they're having. So this is the overall situation that Ukraine is facing, that right now you can get away with it not too bad. I mean, it's going to be a little bit miserable at times, but there are ways to overcome a little too much heat. Come winter, though, when the temperatures fall well below freezing, people are going to have to find ways to deal with the lack of power, unless something can be changed. Interesting note was made. Dag nabbit. Thank you very much. I hate it when I miss the mute button. Let's see. Probably that would be before the weather. I was talking about the weather being in the mid 90s. And let's see, weather in the mid 90s. So therefore it'd be hot right now. Hard for them to keep up with the air conditioner with the power issues. But come winter is going to be the real problem, when it's going to be cold, sub-freezing temperatures, often for weeks at a time. So that's going to be when the power is going to really cause an issue. Now, let's move back to the hryvnia here. That's 40 hryvnias per dollar for the first time in its history. This is a bit of a worrying threshold from a financial perspective, meaning that the hryvnia is getting a little bit weak compared to the dollar. but it might help with their budget a little bit. It's kind of weird how finances work in this regard. For the moment, the real interesting part about this chart, though, is the fact that you can see where the official rate, was heavily controlled, where the value of the hryvnia was really being strictly controlled by the government. Then you see in more recent time here that strict control has been let loose. And that indicates that Ukraine is feeling a little more confident in their economic situation. That means they're not having to worry quite so much about the exact value of their currency compared to the huge inflationary pressures that it had early in the conflict. And now they're feeling like they can bring this thing back off of the tight controls they had before. Admittedly, if it gets bad again, this could easily end up going back onto strict controls as far as the official rate goes. But for now, I generally take this as good news, but to watch this in the future. Glad to have you over here, Real Guys Real Talk. Big fan of your channel, I might add. I do watch every time I get the chance, whenever I see it come through. And so I appreciate that. Jump in there, and if you want to get over to Real Guys Real Talk, they do a really good job talking about some of the issues of the day. He says, evening, everyone. Great to make it on time. Hryvnia has been close to that off and on for the past decade. Yeah, so we're mostly looking at it from the perspective of during the war itself right now. This is it was early in the war. It was around 28-ish, and it's went up to as high as, in the unofficial cash rate, all the way up into about 43-ish territory. It's just barely nudging over that 40. So again, I generally look at this as relatively good signs for the moment, as long as it doesn't start skyrocketing. Oof. Ukraine. Oh, sorry, I got this one out of order here. The most difficult situation in Ukraine's power system is expected in midsummer this year. That's about what we were talking about when it gets really hot, and it'll be hard to keep up with the air conditioning. This map I thought was very telling. The Russians have destroyed and damaged all of these buildings with huge numbers of residents. Now, if you look at the little chart here, you can see that the key says that the teeny tiny dots are 1 to 20 buildings within a 6-mile point. The slightly larger dots are 300 to 500 buildings. More than 5,000 damaged buildings are the large circles, and you can see how heavily this has been affecting right on the effective front lines, plus Kiev. Lviv really seems like it's not in too bad of a shape. Odessa's another major target. Kherson, of course. Mariupol, big affected area. But overall, you can see that the front lines here have been just absolutely destroyed by Russian missiles and rockets and bombs. So keep that in mind as we go forward. The nature of the damage, at least the way it lines out, you can almost see exactly what Russia's been up to. They're not ignoring the western part of the country. That's the wrong word, but they're not able to deliver the blows to the western part of the country, and they probably don't believe there's vital infrastructure out there on the balance at this point in time. There is, but I'm not going to go into that. I'll let the Russians figure that out on their own. Ukrainian parliament apparently has just voted to designate English as an official second language. This, I thought, was really amazing from the perspective of they could have picked any other language. I mean, obviously, for a long time, Russia was kind of an unofficial second language for many years, well before this whole thing came out. But they've actually designated English as an official second language. Some of that's probably because they are required to do so much work with the Americans and with the British, and English is the common language that if you need to communicate, in a hurry. You're going to be able to speak it most anywhere in Europe successfully. That is also a way to say to America and to the British, we are aligning with you. We are putting our eggs in your basket. And we want to be with America and with the British and with Europe as a whole. I thought that was really interesting. This was from a few days ago, from the 28th. I didn't mention it at the time because I was a little tied up in doing other things. This may have been Ukraine's first actual F-16 mission. This is Ukrainian fighter pilots flying F-16s in Belgium, escorting President Zelensky to his meetings in Belgium. They took the picture from the plane where Zelensky was, and just amazing. Yeah, this is where they're at now. It's just get those planes over to Ukraine and get them doing some actual fighting on the front lines. And I have something else about F-16s. I wonder where I stuffed it. Bear with me a second. Oh, Fooey, please tell me I've got this somewhere. Yeah, you're getting this advanced kind of look at everything that's coming here. Okay, yeah, I don't know where it's at right now, but the overall gist of the post was that the the person that was talking about F-16s was saying along the lines of, it's hard to believe that so many people believe that 50 or 100 F-16s, a 50-year-old airframe is going to make a huge difference in Ukraine. What's even worse is the fact that it's true. It will make a huge difference in Ukraine. What does that say about the war, that a 50-year-old airplane can be not a game changer, I hate those words, but could make a huge difference on the battlefields of Ukraine? I mean, look at those the HIMARS missiles, the Gimlers and the ATACMS missiles. Those are making huge gains and benefits on the battlefield. Not necessarily in the terms of territory recaptured, though we have a little bit of that, but in the fact that they're able to stop the Russians from bringing even more equipment and personnel in. The truth is that even our 50-year-old equipment is tremendously effective in the battlefields of Ukraine. So interesting, to say the least. Let's go and jump into the news out of Russia itself. I did mention the problems with electricity over in Ukraine. Well, Ukraine does seem to be doing something about the same problem for Russia. They attacked an electrical substation in Belgorod, and that usually when they hit these, they are strategically located to help out a business or facility that is military in nature. They're not just randomly attacking electrical infrastructure like the Russians. There was a large-scale distributed denial of service attack that paralyzed several Russian ministries and companies that was carried out. Ukraine's intelligence directorate is behind that attack. So Ukraine is fighting on every available front they can. And make no mistake, the information technology front is just as important as the military fronts on the battlefield, in the sense of delaying and stopping Russians from accomplishing their mission of moving forward towards the battlefield. It also causes chaos in the rear areas. From Gina Christian, the Russian Orthodox Church is instrumental in enacting the Kremlin's occupation plan for Ukraine, and this appears to extend to Russian efforts to Russify deported Ukrainian children living in Russia. That's coming from the Institute for the Study of War. I believe I've got that later on. But just to stop for a moment here and think about this. Russia is using the church to try and Russify children, make them into good little Russians. That's the value of the church to Russia, not worshiping a higher power, not God, not Jesus, but what political actions they can take with it. We do now have evidence that Vladimir Putin is wearing a bulletproof vest to his various public events. This is about the same shape and size as the one that we saw on Bush's back during one of his debates. I believe it was Bush, which everybody was like, oh, it's got to be a wire or something like that, something to tell him what to do. No, it looks like it was probably a bulletproof vest. But anyway, this is relatively new. He started doing it as early as 2023, but it's clear that at least by May 9th, he was using this bulletproof vest, and the odds are that he's feeling a little bit of pressure in regards to how popular he actually is at home. And the chances of a lone gunman taking him out are really a lot higher than he'd like to admit. Moving over to Chechnya for just a moment or two. Kind of pointed out a few times here, this is yet another of the nepotism going on over in Chechnya. Kadyrov's nephew is now becoming Chechnya's Minister of Transport. He inherited the post from his father, husband of Kadyrov's older sister. More and more of Kadyrov's relatives are taking up government positions in Chechnya. Corruption, corruption, corruption. A minister of parliament from Russia's ruling party, United Russia, suggested killing those who don't want to see or love us, which obviously refers to specifically those who will criticize the authorities in Russia. This is Russians saying the quiet part out loud. It's not enough for the world to tolerate their existence or ignore their existence. If they're not loved, then anybody who doesn't love them needs to die. In fact, it's to the point where a blue and yellow house in the Irkutsk region was repainted with a grayish color in the middle there instead of the yellow because it looked too much like Ukraine's flag. The colors blue and yellow together is basically banned in many parts of Russia at this point. Don't get out blue and yellow flowers. Don't wear a blue shirt and a yellow scarf. Don't wear a yellow vest and a blue shirt. You know, that type of thing. Now, this one is from Dmitry at War Translated, and he went through another one of these Russian bloggers here, one of their military bloggers, and kind of translated this for us all here. See, I think that cuts off the side just a little bit. Let me see if I can do this here. There we go. They're talking about air defense systems. And they're saying they need to revise their air defense systems because they needed to have separate control cabins, launchers, and other parts of the complex, like the radar system, that are several hundred meters apart from each other so they can have anti-fragmentation screens and the ability to conceal it and all these types of things instead of the blocky, altogether cubes that are easy for things like cluster munitions to take out in volume. This is after the discussion about the S-400 launcher that got destroyed over in Belgorod just the other day by a HIMARS missile. They're having to rethink their air defense systems. The ones they have claimed are so capable, and yet they're finding out that they're not as good as they thought they were. All right, let's get things back together here. Boink. Now, this one, I mean, Dmitry at War Translated also talks about this one. You can read the subtitles as I go through. I'll even make it big enough that you can. There we go. Another member of Russia's parliament, Andrei Gurlev, says that they should strike the Netherlands with nuclear weapons in order to bring Europe to its knees. And if you read through this, it's because the oil deposits in Europe are primarily in the Netherlands. Therefore, he's saying, basically, if we nuke the Netherlands, we can cut off their oil supplies and bring Europe to their knees. That's how Russia thinks. From Ivana Strodner, who is a strong reporter in the area who watches the Baltic states, Ukraine, and the Middle East. Putin's next conquests are already in his sights. Looks like they've... I don't have my free trial anymore, so I'm going to have to skip this one. The overall summary on this one is the Baltic countries, Moldova, Transnistria, were all his next possible targets, plus Kazakhstan and the Asian countries right there. That's where his sights are set on next. So interesting to see this perspective on what they believe Vladimir Putin is looking at. Now, at this point, Vladimir Putin is also looking at things from a slightly different perspective. He has lost so much equipment in Ukraine that he can't just go on military adventurism right now. But all they got to do is resolve this and rebuild, and they'll be on to their next adventure. Already talked about that one. This entire thread is about the bukanka, which I'm sure I've just butchered the pronunciation of, or the loaf. This is a 1965 designed vehicle that they have been making in bulk. Super simple, super straightforward. The technical details are interesting. The simplicity of it, the center-mounted engine, the simple leaf springs and solid axles. Handling is reportedly off-road really good, but otherwise it's a nightmare to handle and otherwise just drive. But the design is from 1965, and that's what they're using for pretty much all of their frontline logistics, their evacuation of soldiers, everything like this. They get destroyed regularly. Top speed's around 50 kilometers per hour, as I understand it. At least off-road. If you're pushing it much faster than that, you're going to have a real rock and ride. Two nurses actually spray-painted the Zhukov monument right outside the Kremlin in Moscow with the writing for the GUR, or the Defense Intelligence Agency of Ukraine. A few hours later, they were already found, put in prison, put into those glass boxes they like to put their prisoners in. And they will likely be charged and sentenced very quickly. Margarita Simonian, this is another one of Russia's propagandists here, openly admits to the Kremlin operating thousands of entities online that spread disinformation targeting the U.S. population. I have seen this in actual effect on people's minds. I literally have watched people go through Kremlin propaganda point after Kremlin propaganda point and then scream when you say that they're saying Kremlin propaganda points, as though they cannot be affected by Kremlin propaganda. And they can't be convinced otherwise. And the reason is because the Russians have a disinformation campaign second to none. Well, possibly second to the Chinese, but I'm not convinced of that. A little bit more about this is, in fact, kind of the same information that Ivana Strodner did in her article, talking about the next targets of Russia's conquest. This broad land grab could include Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Armenia, Georgia, Moldova, and of course, Ukraine itself. Plus, they could also test Latvia's borders and sabotage. There's a lot of things going on, and it's clear that it's going to go a lot farther than this unless it can be stopped outright. Let's move on to the international front for a bit here. 26-year-old Ukrainian from Russian-speaking Donbass was arrested in France after seriously injuring his face while making a homemade bomb in a hotel in Roissy in France. The investigation was entrusted to the local security services, which I'm not going to get into, but this looks like it might be one of the first steps of Russia's terror campaign in France to try and weaken French resolve to support Ukraine. Italy did confirm they're going to send another SAMP-T air defense system to Ukraine. It's been pretty well reviewed. It should be it's good equipment that they're sending. From Joe Biden, peace in Ukraine means a guarantee that Russia will never occupy the country again. But Kyiv's membership in NATO is not necessary for this. This is setting the groundwork for a potential deal, which would get Ukraine safety guarantees in exchange for Russia leaving. I have opinions about this, but they don't really matter because in the end, Ukraine's going to have the right security in order to be safe on the very edges of Russia. And in many ways, that's NATO. They're working on it in other ways, though. They've got bilateral security agreements with many nations now. Something to keep in mind. Now, this face might look familiar. This is Ukrainian-born Congresswoman Sparts. She is under a preliminary inquiry by the House Ethics Committee due to allegations of abusive treatment of staff and general toxicity. She's also the one who was very much opposed to U.S. aid going to Ukraine. There's probably reasons behind that. I will just put it that way. This whole bit right here is getting a little bit murky. The U.S. is proposing a $50 billion loan to Ukraine that's conditional on the European Union extending sanctions against Russia until the end of the war. But this whole thing looks like it's backed by Russia's own money that they've confiscated. It's murky and weird. So this whole situation right here looks like just another one of those weird financial switcheroos they like to pull. The Russians are really ticked off about it, though. Basically calling it outright theft. That would be what they would call everything along these lines. But overall, this is something that's going to have to be followed up on later on if we can get more details on what this weird loan deal is. Lukashenko made a visit to Mongolia, and during that visit, if you pay close attention, you'll see a man running across the main square, the central square, with a Ukrainian flag. Security services managed to catch up to him and confiscate the flag. They then ran with the flag themselves, though not unfurled like the initial man. So, but still, it looks like so far the man got away. Turkey is once again playing both sides of the fence yet again. Certainly, we would like to become a member of the BRICS alliance there, so we'll see how it goes this year. According to Hakan Fidan, Prime Minister of Turkey, he said he's looking forward to attending a meeting of the mechanism or the group in Russia next week, where one of the topics on the agenda is expected to be the possibility of Turkey, a NATO ally, joining BRICS. So they're playing both sides of this. And if they join BRICS, it would be well for NATO to kick them clean on out. It would not be good, but no man can serve two masters. From the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, he believes that the current permissions for Ukrainian armed forces to use weapons from the Biden administration are not enough. Washington must stop micromanaging the war effort in Ukraine, and he plans to raise this conversation with the Biden administration. I continue to say it, and I'll say it again. We will have conversations with the White House about it. So they're calling for even more liberal interpretations of the rules of engagement with American weapons in Ukraine. Democrats in Congress followed up as well, calling for the removal of any restrictions on the use of American weapons by Ukraine. I hope the restriction will be lifted. I support the bipartisan letter sent by our Intelligence Committee on this very issue. And we are seeing Ukraine begin to make better use of these weapons, especially in Crimea, according to Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu. Robbie says Turkey seems to go with the. Sorry, I can't read it. It's behind something for me. Dang it. There it goes. Turkey seems to go with the wind these days, Robbie says. Absolutely correct. It's they're blown about by every possible wind. And until they really settle down and get some principles, that's going to be a constant issue. From Germany's Minister of Defense, Boris Pistorius, Putin's war economy is headed towards another conflict. We must be ready for war by 2029. We must be aware that a Russian victory would cost us all more in the end than our support for Ukraine today. Vladimir Putin, for his part, has continued to claim that he has been deceived by the West, deceived by the West, deceived by the West. In fact, he said that this is the sixth complaint in 2024 and 8 times in 2023. The question I have to ask is, if you believe you have been duped by the West so often, maybe you ought to look inside yourself for a moment. But the truth is that the Russians interpret anything they want, however they wish. And they will blame the West for everything because that's the only way they can push off responsibility for their own actions. In the same statement, he said that Russia has the right to supply weapons to countries from which strikes can be performed on countries supplying weapons to Kyiv. Russia wants to create chaos and tension all over the world, says Anton Herashchenko. This is a global danger. It will escalate while Russia is strong enough to do so. My comment on that is, from a legal perspective, he is probably correct. However, right now he's got a tacit agreement that if you leave those other countries alone from direct attacks, they don't directly attack him back. To do a literal direct attack on NATO countries or those that are supplying weapons to Kyiv would bring NATO into the conflict directly and with no limits. He does not want that. Just saying. What happens if a Russian fighter jet is shot down by a Western weapon in Russian airspace? From the chair of the Defense Committee of the German Bundestag, Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann, it only means that Russia will have one less plane. Now, the Americans, for their part, I believe it was Kirby, said that we have not restricted Ukraine from attacking Russian aircraft coming into their country in Russian airspace, with the only real restriction being that it has to be coming to do damage to Ukraine, not just a random airplane flying around over there somewhere. Maybe they should have told the Ukrainians that sooner. Fact is, here's that statement from the National Security Communications Advisor, John Kirby. And on Ukraine, the president obviously on Thursday made this decision to allow American arms to be shot into a very limited area of Russia. President Zelensky over the weekend thanked him for this and then immediately said it's not enough. We're going to need to have this right throughout much of the rest of Russia. We're going to need to have it perhaps in other areas. And we actually heard Secretary Blinken on the last day of his trip last week say this may not be the last area that gets approved. And Kirby's reply is, well, I won't get ahead of the decisions that haven't been made. As you well know, every step of this war, as the war has evolved, the battlefield conditions have changed. We have evolved and we have changed our support to Ukraine. And I wouldn't expect that general approach is going to be any different in coming weeks and months. We'll see where things go and what the Ukrainians need. I mean, look, who can blame President Zelensky for wanting more stuff and more ability to use the stuff as his country continues to come under attack, and as they particularly face a still concerted effort by Russia to endanger Kharkiv, one of their most important cities in the north. So I don't think it should come as a shock to anybody that President Zelensky would be grateful on one hand, but also eager to continue to press his case going forward. And so we'll have those talks. We'll have those conversations with the Ukrainians. Absolutely, we will. And whether it leads to any additional policy changes, I can't say at this point. But we're not going to turn our back on what Ukraine needs. And we're going to continue to try to, again, evolve our support to them as the battlefield evolves as well. That was a lot of statement from Kirby there. The overall end result is the U.S. may allow wider strikes on Russian territory with U.S. supplied weapons. Most likely that's going to be with clear military targets in mind, not anything that's a little bit hazy or shady. So keep that in mind. That's a possibility that may come down. While this is an interesting picture, it's a former Dutch or Jordanian flak panzer Gepard. That's a short-range air defense system is what it is. Anti-aircraft gun is what it is. The thing that was interesting in this, though, was that the U.S. is currently in the process of getting 60 more Gepards from Jordan, refurbishing them, and sending them to Ukraine. So that's even more of this air defense systems that are going to be able to roll into Ukraine in short order. Now, we've discussed Serbia a couple of times lately with all the craziness going on over there and things like that. The Federation Council approved the ratification of the protocols to the export credit agreements with Serbia, from TASS, of course. This is restructuring Serbia's debt to Russia. And now you probably know why Serbia has been more on Russia's side than the West lately. Because somebody's got a leash on them, and it's in the form of debt. And any nation that accepts debt is going to find that they are eventually going to have to pay that back, either in cold hard cash or in favors or other subjugation of their actual sovereignty to another nation. Debt will be the end of this world in that regard. Let's go ahead and move on to the front lines here. No major changes here, but there are a few. There have been a couple of advances at Novopokrovska. They are not big ones. They're just inky-dinky ones here. Let me just kind of pop that. You can kind of see the other one up top here near Arkhangelsk. Okay, my tongue's not working today, so I apologize. I usually am better with my pronunciations, but it's just not coming today. And you can see some of the other things going on over here, a gray zone expansion down here. All this is over in the east. None of it is happening up in the north, where we've seen a whole lot of effort going on. But this is where, in the Donetsk region, this appears to be Russia's real goal. They tried to pull people, men and equipment away by doing this advance over in Kharkiv, and it appears that has effectively failed. Now, from the Institute for the Study of War, select Russian military commentators continue to complain about superior Ukrainian drone and electronic warfare capabilities on the battlefield, continuing to highlight the rapid and constant tactical and technological innovation cycles that are shaping the battle space in Ukraine. The interesting part about this is that not 6 months ago, the opposite complaint was happening. The Russians had very effective electronic warfare capabilities. The Ukrainians, not so much. But the Ukrainians began to adapt and overcome and find ways around it. And now it appears that Ukraine actually has the advantage in the electronic warfare domain. Talking about the Avdiivka-Pokrovsk sector, that's kind of the area we were talking about a moment ago where the Russians had made small advances. This, according to the Ministry of Defense of the UK, has remained the probable main effort of Russian forces over the last 3 days, with a high level of operational activity. Russian forces made minor gains in the northern part of this sector toward the villages of Sokol and Yevenivka. On a parallel axis, approximately 3 kilometers further south, Russian forces are likely approaching the outskirts of the village of Novoselivka Persha. Further south, Russian forces have made no significant gains despite heavy attacks against Ukrainian positions west of the village of Netalova astride the E50 highway. Russian attacks against the village of Novelska have reportedly been repelled, and the village likely remains in Ukrainian hands. Over the next week, this sector is likely to remain an area of significant operational focus as Russian forces attempt to maintain an operational tempo in the face of heavy losses. So we're looking at that whole map situation, and really it's saying that things are not going well for Russia at this point. They're taking small bites, teeny tiny bites, but they're not able to capitalize on the other situations going on and push through to make real advances. Zelensky, though, described the situation right now as critical. These weeks, he said, will determine this year, with Russia's strongest attacks going in Donetsk Oblast and Moscow's forces steadily advancing. That appears to remain the Kremlin's primary target, trying to get all of Donetsk Oblast so they can claim a final victory there. Sersky kind of put a different spin on it, saying the battlefield situation is difficult, but Ukraine has a chance to change it. They continue to push that Kharkova, Pokrovsk, Kupiansk, and Kharkiv sectors, according to Sersky. He added in particular that the area in Kupiansk is especially tough, with the Russians trying to break through Ukrainian defenses from 2 directions. So the Kupiansk direction appears to be one of the most pressed right now, but the main focus remains over on Donetsk in the east. This video popped up that I could not confirm with any other sources. It's a bridge reportedly in the Kupiansk section being hit with a bomb or something else like that, or destroyed either way. With the aggressive nature of the situation near Kupiansk, this could have been done by either side at this point in time. And I just cannot confirm which side did it or exactly when it was carried out. From Wargonzo, the Russian source over here, he's pretty much confirming everything we discussed. Zaporizhia area, no change to the lines of contact, though positional battles are continuing, he says. Donetsk front, he says that things are continuing at Paraskovievka and Hirivka, with heavy fighting continuing without much progress. Not much change in Krasnohorivka, with much fighting going on. There are advances in Harlivka and battles taking place on the approaches to the populated area there, the city itself. And similar in Yasnoharivka area, with fighting continuing in the area of the village of Sokol and Novolexandrivka, which is, I think, how it's supposed to be pronounced, with the Russian troops fighting on the outskirts of the village. So that is the Donetsk front where the main action is taking place. Chasiv Yar, no significant changes. Kharkiv, and here's where it gets interesting. And this is the reason why Wargonzo, despite being a Russian source that is clearly pro-Russian, they report this accurately. Here, the swing continues in Vovchansk. The Ukrainian armed forces are constantly counterattacking, trying to regain lost positions. Sometimes counterattacks are unsuccessful. Sometimes we have to recapture lost positions again. So they are even acknowledging that the situation in Vovchansk is going towards Ukraine, to the point that this blue area right here appears to have been recaptured by Ukrainian forces in the area north of the river in Vovchansk. So this is good news for Ukraine. They're pushing the Russians back and have nearly got them out of the actual city itself. Otratina, there have been small advances on the outskirts of Novo-Oleksandrivka. There we go. While the main defenses are a little bit more to the northeast, this particular village is being particularly fiercely fought over right now. And here's the situation in near Kupiansk. This is Sinkivka, and you can see here that the Russians have once again recaptured a large section of open territory. Let's compare that to the deep state map so you can kind of get some better context. We're talking about this area right up here, which I'm circling with my mouse. Probably a little bit hard to see, but if I keep moving, you kind of probably see it. Sinkivka is right here. So the Null Reports map says the Russians have captured basically in this area right here, north of Sinkivka. But these lines haven't changed in months to any significant degree. The Russians may be trying to push here, but they're not doing so very successfully. In fact, they were on the outskirts of Sinkivka about 6 months ago, 5 months ago. Now they're not even near the outskirts itself, which is just a tiny little village where the Russians are basically maintaining positions in the forested area to the north. And that's all the front lines. And I've been kind of burning through it today. So, absolutely. Do you have any questions? Anything you need me to go back over? Let me know, please. Now let's go ahead and move on to the interesting extras today. And I've got a few that I think you will appreciate. You may not recognize these two gentlemen, but I do. Bill Browder and Garry Kasparov. Garry Kasparov being the Russian chess master who is now a fighter for democracy in the West and opposition to Russia. Bill Browder, also a fighter for democracy in the West as well. These two are all on Russia's no bueno list. And the more no bueno they are, the more likely it is that Russia will try and do things to them. In this case, they were sitting next to each other at the opening dinner in Oslo. With so many glasses at the crowded table, Garry asked Bill, "Is this your water or mine?" "Garry," he said, "it doesn't matter. They'd both be poisoned." A little bit of dark humor going on there. Slovakian PM Robert Fico has made his first address since he was wounded in the shooting last month. Robbie, I'll pop back on that and I'll see if I can get some more details for you. I can at least get you the link to what my reference was there. And so I'll get that and I'll do further follow up on it. Fico's actually not looking too bad, but you can see he definitely looks worse for wear compared to what he looked like before this incident. He does say that he plans to return to work in June or July if everything is all right. And then he made this rather revealing statement. "I don't feel hatred towards the man that shot me. I'm not going to take any legal action against him or compensation for injuries." And while Fico is definitely one of those guys that I don't... that is on the wrong side of this most of the time, I think I might be able to, at least for the moment, say that some of it may be that there is a genuine human being in there somewhere. Maybe his heart can be turned. I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. How about this for a mobile anti-drone technical in Ukrainian service? You can see they put together a homemade mount for an M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun that is apparently all leg powered. So there's no motors here, just a very smooth turning mount there that he's able to turn in any which direction, complete with a scope, which that's a really long eye relief scope. I'm just going to say, if he's able to use it from there. Now, this is a Ukrainian first-person view munition hitting the roof of a cope cage-equipped Russian tank. Even with the cope cage there, the drone penetrated on through, and the tank itself suffered a catastrophic ammunition detonation. It does appear that the turret itself was merely knocked off. It did not win the turret toss. It definitely didn't get the altitude that many of its brethren have gotten. On the other end of that stick, here's a Ukrainian truck returning from a combat mission here. Take a look at this wrecked vehicle. And they were apparently just still driving it in this condition. I wonder what it went through. I mean, I really did. Now, this video is about a minute and a half long. I'm going to just play it and let it go.
Oh.
You are the memory.
U.S. Army. Bonjour, madame. So nice. Oh, you look most elegant.
It's for you.
Formidable. I knew I had to come back.
Welcome to France. What happened here in Normandy links us definitively to the United States, to the Americans.
Hello.
Merci d'être là. Merci. Très important.
Ça me fait grand plaisir pour la France. There you go.
Je sais tout ce qu'on leur doit et on leur dira jamais assez.
I would like to express to you, dear veterans, and to your brothers in arms, our deepest respect and my deepest love.
The greatest honor in France.
Thank you.
Grand plaisir d'être ici.
On se voit jeudi à Omaha Beach. Je serai avec deux présidents.
Ah.
Le président des États-Unis et le président français.
Ah.
Et plus Jill Biden.
Ah, très bien.
Soyez sages d'ici
Très
là.
bien.
As a reminder, D-Day, the 80th anniversary of D-Day, is tomorrow. And this is just a small reminder of the sacrifice that so many made to recover Europe from the throes of Nazi Germany. Robbie says, last comment of the night, when my wife and I visited France a few years ago, it was during their V-Day celebration. They all dressed up in white clothing and cloths were laid in the center of Paris to remember us storming the beaches. France is very grateful. Perhaps more so now than they have for a while, but they know they know what it took. They were the partisans that did the sabotage work against the Nazis. They were the ones who formed the resistance. They were the ones that prepared the way so that D-Day could happen successfully, so that the right resources would be in the right places, and the wrong Germans would not be anywhere they weren't supposed to be. There's a lot that went on behind the lines in France, and they remember. Not related to the Ukraine war, but a mass casualty incident reported in Haifa in northern Israel. An IDF military camp seems to have been hit by Hezbollah drones and rockets, with at least 10 casualties reported. This is unusual. Usually the Iron Dome and Iron Fist and things like that are successfully able to intercept these rockets. Makes me wonder exactly what happened that caused this particular gap in coverage. We'll have to see if they get some more information on that. Now, this one is just kind of a funny video here. I gotta mute the sound because it's pretty sure that's a copyrighted song. You can see this tank charging straight at what would have normally been a bridge right there, but you can see that the actual prepared bridge is just to the right. They stuffed the entire front end of the tank right into the soft dirt right there. Recovery vehicle will be needed. Once again, I want to just kind of point out stories like this one. This is coming from Anton Herischenko. This is a 70-year-old man who walked from Donetsk region to Kharkiv region with 3 cows and a dog because he did not want to leave them. Volunteers later helped him to get to Poltava region and find shelter there. But once again, Ukrainians don't want to be under Russian rule. We're seeing 70, 80, 90-year-old people walking the distance across no man's land, across the front lines where they're shelling all around them to escape from Russian control. They know what it's like. They lived it. Younger Ukrainians and the rest of us should pay close attention, because those are the people that lived through what Soviet Russia and before really represented. And we'll end off with this super cute picture. This is Joe the cat. Ukrainian border guards found him in one of the villages of Kharkiv region. Now Joe lives with them, and the defender will take him home after victory. So, a cute cat to finish off your video for today. Thank you for joining me today. Robbie, hang on with me for just 1 second here. Let's grab... There is an article from the Kiev Independent. I'll grab that direct link and drop it right there. And I will do some additional research and see if I can get more on this for the next video. And on that, you guys have a great rest of your day. I appreciate you being here. And I do want to thank you one more time because you guys make the stream special. Your unique comments and your unique thoughts, even when I'm kind of burning through information in a hurry, I want to see them because they make a big difference to me. So you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.